What camera?
It's on.
All right, here we go. Live from the Combine, Patriots Beat, Patriots Daily crossover. Alex, Barth, Taylor, Kyles, Brian, Hines, wrapping up the first full day of events here from the Indianapolis Convention Center. No testing today. That won't come until Thursday. Honestly, not a ton of draft talk we're going to do on this episode of the show. Today was more of a fact-finding mission, laying out the platform for the offseason. That's the Patriots, and that's every other team. The majority of head coaches and general managers spoke today. A handful speak tomorrow. That includes Elliot Wolf. He'll talk at 1 o'clock. But we did hear from Gerard Mayo today. We heard quite a bit.
Barth.
Wow.
It's been a long day.
It's been, I got
It's
here
been a long
at
24 hours
a.m.
for Barth.
I got here at 7:45 a.m. These guys just brought me granola bar. It was my first meal of the day. See if we can get through the rest of this.
You got it, champ.
We heard from Mike Vrabel today quite a bit. He spoke at the podium for 15 minutes, spoke in a scrum with local reporters for 15 minutes, and he also did a couple of radio interviews, including some on Patriots.com. So we got about like an hour of content from Mike Vrabel today. There was a lot to take away there, but the big one that everybody's talking about, Mike Vrabel talking about it being an aggressive offseason for the Patriots. Let's start here. He said, hopefully we're going to have an aggressive offseason. And then sort of said, like, that's the plan. Some people are really reading into the word hopefully. I think that was more of like a sarcastic kind of thing. But are you guys worried he left the door open at all?
Not really.
Yeah,
I think that was just kind of how the question was phrased, like, what's your approach to the offseason? He's like, hopefully we're going to be aggressive. They have all this money. They should be aggressive. And he also laid out, you know, you go into this with plans like option A, option B, option C, and you want to see, you know, all these other teams are bidding for these players too. So they want to be aggressive. They're going to be aggressive. But it's just what plan and what path they kind of go down here.
The very necessary asterisk from last year's, we're going to burn some cash. Like, yeah, that's great in theory. But as we saw literally today, Eric DeCosta of the Ravens mentioned that, you know, Ronnie Stanley's not going anywhere. They're going to find a way to make a deal work. And that's what we've seen with T. Higgins, with reports on Trey Smith. It's a little back and forth. We don't know for sure if those guys are going to stay. But good players typically do not hit free agency. So when Vrabel says that, it is, yes, we may have a plan A, may have to pivot to plan B because you don't know who's actually going to be there. And if we really like a guy, sometimes that means we got to pay him a little more to, you know, get a guy here. I like that, acknowledging that, you know, there's going to be a little bit of a, as we like call it in the media, bit of a suck tax for a little bit. But yeah, I did like that he said, hopefully, because I think it's very important to make fair expectations for fans, for people who follow the team, that there's no guarantee they're going to sign like 5 guys at $20 million contracts.
And like, they're not. They have the most resources. It's not unlimited. And there's just a bandwidth thing, right? You're going to have top 6, 7 free agents all in a row. Like, that's going to be tough. So I really liked the second answer Vrabel gave when we were talking to him in the scrum. Brian, you mentioned that he talked about being able to pivot, having contingency plans. I think that's really important because even if it's not, like, they can still have a good offseason, having their ideal offseason. Like, no team is going to have their ideal offseason. So you got to be able to you know, make changes and adjust. And I also like he put a line at the end of that answer that I don't think is getting enough play. He said, we're not going to sign players just to sign players. And that's really important because aggressive is good. I want the Patriots to be aggressive. There is a very fine line between aggressive and reckless. And, you know, making sure you're paying top dollar to get top of the market players. If you have to overpay a Josh Sweat, if you have to overpay a Javon Holland, Trey Smith, right, one of these guys, I'm good with that. Like, because those are the kind of players that are going to make an impact. But there is a line you worry about where it's like, we heard today, you kind of talked about it. Bengals GM was very insistent that T. Higgins isn't going anywhere. He's getting a long-term deal. We'll see, but that was half his press conference was, the line he gave was, I'm not worried right now. I won't be worried until I have to be worried. Schneider from the Seahawks laughed when he was asked about DK Metcalf.
And you were camped out there, too.
I was ready for that. I was ready for that. I wasn't the only Patriots reporter there. People know what we're watching. But, like, these wide receivers are falling off the market. What you can't do, but what I think some people may want to see the Patriots do, you can't look at it and say, we need a receiver who's the best receiver. We're going to pay him like a top receiver, right? And Vrabel talked about that, too. He talked about the need for a true number one. He acknowledged it's a need. He acknowledged to be aggressive. But he also said, you know, these guys don't grow on trees. I think exactly what he said was, they're not just walking around here, and if you see one, let me know. Right? So Taylor, eyes out. Right, we're looking. We're looking. But, you know, what you can't do is be, well, you know, we thought we were getting T. Higgins. That was our plan. We're now not going to get him. So we'll just pay Stephon Diggs like T. Higgins to make sure we get him because we had that money aside and hope he turns into T. Higgins. We think Stephon Diggs off the ACL, we can make it work. Cooper Kupp at 32 years old, we can make it work. Like, I get the vibe they're going to be aggressive, which is good. But I also think they want to make sure that they don't overextend and be reckless, which is also important because you lock yourself in a couple bad contracts year one, and it's going to be 2021, 20. Not that those are all bad contracts, but they signed Nelson Aguilar to be more than the player he was, right? Jonnu Smith to be more than the player he was. Jalen Mills to be more than the player he was. And you're going to have some free agent signings that don't work out, but you want to minimize that, and you want to kind of do it strategically.
And they set the bedrock of this last season. And obviously we can disagree on who they signed and whatnot. But at the end of the day, their point was we are going to re-sign players because we need to have a new foundation, the guys who actually helped the team in the time that they were on it. A lot of those guys from 2021, they were brought back. And then they said, hey, we're not going to go out there and sign a bunch of guys similar. Like, they're not just going to sign names. And, yes, they probably could have signed some more guys. Maybe some moves didn't exactly work out. But at least we know that from Wolf's perspective, he and Vrabel are probably on the same page. And then when I asked Vrabel, like, are you going to try to get guys that fit your scheme, or are you going to try to make your scheme fit the players that you have on the roster? Because looking at the spine of the defense especially, there's a lot of guys where you say they're probably replaceable. They're either getting older, they're injured, it's a contract issue, or all of those things. And he said for the guys that we're paying a premium for, like, yeah, we're going to expect you to, another kind of quote that he had was veteran players, like, make yourself basically impossible to get rid of. Be a guy that we need on this team. So I do think when it comes, like, I like Darius Slayton a lot. I'm not going to say, hey, sign Darius Slayton to a $15 million contract. Like, that's irresponsible. The only way
you do have to have a line.
Exactly. Like,
he's
the
not
only
the
bad
shiny new
contracts.
car that he was talking about.
Right,
Right.
the shiny
He
new
said
car
when
on the
there's
lot.
one shiny car, like, you can overpay for that. But
Right.
if you're getting, the model below or something, and there's a lot of those versions, you want to be a little bit more.
And you know what?
Better with your spending.
You may be going, look at a shiny new convertible. There's no shiny new convertible. Maybe there's a really nice SUV, right? I'd rather
Get a couple SUVs.
pay top of the market. Well, I'd rather pay top of the market for the really nice SUV than, spend convertible money on a sedan.
And maybe
fair.
get a pontoon boat on the side.
I missed that reference.
This is going deep.
I
I
don't
don't
know,
know
we're
nothing
just
about
getting a
boats.
couple nice things instead of one big.
Big pontoon boat guy. It's like
I don't have a
I like a
license,
good
so these
pontoon
guys are just
boat.
doing
it's like
laps around me
52
right now.
degrees out here, and we all feel like it's summer. Like, we're walking around last night. Like,
I'm ready to go
it's
on a
so
pontoon.
nice out. It was like 35 degrees and raining. Taylor, you just said something that reminded me of something else Mike Vrabel said. And it's tough to, like, the way he said it. You need to go and watch the clip, and CLNS has it on their YouTube channel. And I think it was an answer to your question about guys who fit the roster versus, guys who fit the scheme. And he said the roster's going to look very different at the end of August than it does right now. And he said that with some conviction. And it's interesting because last year they turned over a significant portion of the roster. I think we'd all agree on that. It was like 25, 26 players, 40%. That's pretty high in the NFL. Usually roster turnover in 1 year, 40 to 45. You start getting 48, 49. That's like you rarely see, and I'm talking week 17 to week 1. So it's not, more guys come back for training camp, they get cut, whatever, right? That's significant roster turnover. Do you think we could maybe see more than that? Do you think because they only have 17 pending free agents. So they don't have, in theory, a lot of room to turn the roster over without getting a little drastic. Do you think we're going to see them get a little drastic in turning over this roster this offseason? Either one of you.
I definitely think so, and I think a lot of that's going to come from the spine, like I mentioned, of the defense. Because you look at the offense, there can be a lot of turnover, but I think more you just need some veteran additions. Like you need guys that give some of the younger players from last season, who Vrabel kind of gave a mulligan to and said, like, there's talent in last year's rookie class. We just need to really make sure we develop those guys. So offensively, more veterans, but defensively, when you look at defensive tackle, there's really no edge rusher, so you can't even start to look there. Linebacker, safety, you got older guys whose contracts are either expiring or they're not exactly living up to them. So again, Vrabel mentioned if you're playing hard, if you're a good teammate, if you're showing up and you're putting the work in, it's not like he's trying to push you out the door, but I also think there's a certain level of athleticism, of explosiveness that he's going to want to inject in this defense, and I think this is the free agent class to do it. Offensively, it may be a little sparse, but I think on the defensive side of the ball, there's going to be some options for them to make some significant upgrades and potentially completely rebuild the defense. There's a couple of spots like edge rusher, like cornerback, where you already know they have pretty gaping holes.
And the other thing with that, Vrabel has no ties or connections to anyone on this team right now. Like, he didn't draft any of these guys. He didn't sign any of these guys. If it's a Devon Godshaw or Jelani Tavai, like, he didn't bring that guy in. Like, he's going to have no feelings to want to keep him, and he's want to go get his own guys and bring those in. So I do think there's going to be a lot of roster turnover here.
So let me ask you guys this. Again, the number last year, 40% roster turnover from week 18, 2023 to week 1, 2024. Week 18, 2024 to week 1, 2025. More or less than 40% roster turnover for the Patriots.
I'm going to say more because I think the defense is going to look very different. And then on the offense, it's going to be enough probably new faces that when you combine, it's like, oh, wow. Like maybe 53% of this roster looks very different.
So they're both going more. You can't pick that one on Prize Picks, but you can pick, we got full NBA slates. We were at the Pacers game last night.
Oh, yeah.
That was a good time. NHL's back. Those sports are in the swing, and even baseball's right around the corner. So do you guys have the promo code memorized?
CLNS. Play $5 if you're a new customer and get $50 instantly. You don't even have to win.
Ooh,
but if you do, we obviously are winners here, right?
Right.
So that's what we do. So we like to win in our lineups. Mike Cadlick always puts out lineups. He only does 2 players, which is lame. Me and Barth go for
that's
the big
6-time multiplier.
The
And we
big
hit one.
6-time multiplier. We did one.
We hit
hey,
one.
He's not going to defend
you
himself.
even enjoyed the Pat Speed experience picking the Prize Picks lineup.
Mike,
so
we gotta
go
do better.
to Prize Picks. Use that code CLNS and play $5. New customers get $50 instantly on Prize Picks. Run your game.
Hail Mary.
Anything else stand out from Mike Vrabel today? So I'll just a little behind the scenes here. The Commanders-Bears game from this year is on the TV behind the cameras. And no, you said that was going to be the
I
Hail
thought
Mary.
it was. It was 6 seconds.
Is
left.
it the
Okay,
next
so my
play?
bad. Then
Okay.
Hail Mary's
We're
next.
about to
There's
get
no
the Hail Mary.
chance
Turn on
the
NFL Network
Bears
if you
lose
want to
this
watch
game.
an awesome Hail Mary from Jaden Daniels.
Put that on mute and watch it. Where's Tyreek Stevenson going there?
Turn around!
Oh, my God, he's talking to the crowd.
So something else from Vrabel, too. Did you know? So he talked about helping Drake May, and he brought up protecting him, which obviously is what he brought up at the intro presser. That was the big thing, and that's where trenches came from. He also mentioned getting him receivers, but he mentioned a specific kind of receiver, contested catch. Now, the buzz around here for the last couple days, and even leading into the combine, I should say, going back to last week, was that Ted McMillan, maybe people aren't as high on him as the consensus right now, as kind of receivers as a whole. But, the receiver that Mike Vrabel described today was Ted McMillan.
Sounds like Ted.
Should we be talking more about Ted at 4 after today, or was that kind of just a comment in passing? Like, yeah, contested catch receivers are great. You don't have to be as accurate as the quarterback. That's just kind of a universally good thing, and maybe I'm reading too much into it.
I think it's kind of wild.
Brian's locked in on this Hail Mary.
It's just let
There
it rip.
goes.
Where's Tyreek Stevenson? Not doing his job. And they caught it. Touchdown.
There we go.
Who would have expected that?
Ted McMillan. Would Ted McMillan have caught that?
I think
I
Ted
would hope
McMillan
so.
would have caught
Bounced
that.
right to
Okay.
him.
But also, Ted, one, I thought it was
Yeah.
pretty outrageous that people are just kind of not even assuming that he's an option at 4, because I think with the skill set, it fits Drake May so perfectly. Just go back and watch the Kayshon Boutte targets deep downfield. The go balls are awesome. But then there's those posts where you just wish he could go up and body somebody, and he's not able to. So I always thought that while I didn't like him as one of the main options at 4, I thought it was kind of crazy to just not think he was an option. But I also think that when you talk about these contested catchers, I think that's most of this wide receiver class. Like a couple years ago, we had all the undersized guys who played bigger than they were. Last year, you had all the freaks and all the great, X's and all those guys. And now this year, it's like you got a lot of Z/maybe X types who may not be the most explosive, but they're very fluid and they're really good at the catch point. So Ted should be on everybody's radar. But I also think when you look at guys like Jack Besh, like Pat Bryan, who's one of my guys on day 3, like there are definitely options throughout the first 100 or so picks where you will be able to actually get those contested catch guys, I think.
Brian, you going to take a closer look at Ted at 4?
No, not yet. It's just, I like Ted, but he's just not my preferred preference style of wide receiver.
I would say, but
I know, but Vrabel definitely described them, right? Like
Yeah.
the contested catch, even his first introductory press conference. He talked about some yak ability, which Ted has
also,
in his bag. But I'm more of the my preference is get a guy who can separate, get a guy who can strike some fear with his speed element into the defense. We'll see where Ted clocks in if he runs the 40 with his lawn speed. They just haven't had that guy, I feel like, in a while, and that's my preference over another one of these contested catch jump ball guys, which they kind of tried to pair with Drake May last year with the rookies. Didn't work. Now Ted's more talented than Jalen Polk and Javon Baker, right? But
yes.
My preference would be that other kind of style. But
You
I
must
don't
not like this draft class.
No, I really don't.
Honestly, the more I
Jalen
look
Noel
at-
is my guy.
Right. The more I look at these receivers outside, Luther Burden's mine, but in Matthew Golden, but as a whole, I think I'm lower on the class now than I was even at the end of the college football season, right? You mentioned that separate, or before I go to that, anything else on Vrabel from you guys? Anything else stand out?
I will say schematically, because I asked him about a little bit like the 4-man rush, because when I studied and Mike and I broke this down, we talked about some of the scheme changes to expect. Very rarely blitzes. He's trying to send his 4 defensive linemen or usually a slot corner, and then one of those defensive linemen drops into coverage. He doesn't like sending extra rushers. So I asked, is that really like a philosophical thing, especially because we just saw in the Super Bowl, Eagles didn't have to blitz. So is that the kind of thing he'd want to maybe carry over, especially with so many options to pass rush on the defensive line? And he mentioned, which I thought was encouraging, it's really more of an adaptable approach. He's like, hey, we could play different fronts. You know, we want to be able to rush with 4, but it's also where's that guy coming from? And he also kind of hinted, like when we heard about the running scheme, how he mentioned they wanted to be zone and then kind of go gap as a switch up. And it was like, okay, that's telling because Josh has typically been a gap kind of offensive coordinator, and we'll see what happens. With the defense, he sounded like he wanted man coverage to be more of a change of pace style. And I think that's because of another thing he mentioned where he said he wants guys to have their eye on the quarterback and make plays on the ball. The Patriots have been one of the worst teams in the NFL in recent seasons at creating those turnovers. Yep. So as much as I want to see Gonzo playing a lot of man coverage because that's where he's best, I also don't mind seeing the next evolution of Gonzo, where in this quarters-heavy scheme, maybe having his eyes on the quarterback allows him to bait guys more often like we started to see flashes of last year.
And along those lines, thanks for reminding me, Taylor, we did a little bit of news from Mike Vrabel that Terrell Williams is going to be the defensive play caller.
The only other thing I had, and it wasn't a major surprise, we asked him who has final say, right? And last year we were here, we asked Elliot Wolf, and he said me. Like, I have final say. I'm going to send in the draft card. And Mike Vrabel didn't give us as definitive of an answer, but he basically said I wouldn't be here if I didn't have a good say over this roster. So he didn't say it's him, but, you know, where the signs were pointed, Mike Vrabel has final say on this roster.
And to the point of Terrell Williams being the play caller, that's something we've discussed is kind of like I'm a little hesitant about that because we just had, and it's not the same thing. Like Terrell Williams is one of the best defensive line coaches in the NFL. DeMarcus Covington was one of the best as well. But when you have someone who's worked with the front a lot, sometimes they don't understand the back end quite as well. And that's a bit of a concern for me is, okay, is he going to be as accommodating and really maximize his secondary as well? Now, obviously, Vrabel's going to have a say in that. These guys have been game planning together for years. So it's not like I think that Vrabel doesn't know what he's going to be getting out of Williams. But I'm very interested to see with Vrabel saying he's an aggressive coach. Does that mean he's going to send blitzes? Is he going to rely on his guys to get pressure on their own?
Yeah.
I think that's going to be very interesting to see exactly what Terrell Williams, the play caller, actually looks like since he hasn't done it in the league.
Well, Vrabel did mention, he's like, yeah, he's going to call plays. He's coached aggressive defensive linemen, which, like, those don't necessarily go together unless you're going to put them together, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, okay, so he's going to call a defense, you figure, for aggressive defensive linemen. So moving on from the Patriots, we heard from other GMs say Brian mentioned he wants the separator. One of the big storylines for me this week is Travis Hunter. How does Travis Hunter view Travis Hunter? We know how the league, we've heard how the league views him, but what position does he want to play? And what's interesting today is, I mean, I'm kind of going back here. We did learn from one team. The Browns said they view Travis Hunter as a wide receiver. That's not just a team viewing, and the reporting's been most teams view him as a corner, but the Browns view him as a wide receiver, and they're picking ahead of the Patriots. Does that make you any more or less confident? I mean, the Browns need both. They need receivers and corners. Does that make you any more or less confident knowing the Browns view Hunter as a receiver that he could fall to 4?
I'm pretty indifferent because I think he can play wherever he wants, to be honest. Like, when I really kind of dove into the tape, and, I was a little bit hesitant at first, and then I watched, and I was like, oh, yeah, no, this dude is different.
Like, I get that, but it's more like,
are they more inclined to pick him now that they view him as a because they are kind of in the Patriots category where they are better at corner than wide receiver, right? Like, they have Denzel Ward, they have a few guys in that secondary, but
Newsome.
they need Newsome. They need wide receivers, and like that was our big thing in our first mock. We took Travis Hunter, being like, okay, he's a really good corner. He's probably a better corner right now than a wide receiver, but for the Patriots, it makes more sense to play him at wide receiver.
Like, let's say, I guess the scenario you run into now is, okay, Abdul Carter goes off the board at 1, right? Doesn't matter what happens, or the Browns are at 2, sorry, not at 3, they're at 2. Right now it's, all right, we don't like any of these quarterbacks. Travis Hunter's the best player on the board, and now he plays a position of need for the Browns, which we didn't know going into this. So that was interesting today. Obviously, we got all this stuff. Ronnie Stanley sounds like going back to Baltimore. T. Higgins, the Bengals really want him back. DK Metcalf not going anywhere. That free agent market is shrinking by the minute. And it's only going to shrink more, I think, as this week goes on.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to find some other avenue. And Vrabel's mentioned that. He hasn't just talked about free agency. He hasn't just talked about the draft. He's acknowledged there's other ways, and obviously trade is a big one of those. You mentioned some guys who may not be on the market.
Yeah.
I'm still going to just say A.J. Brown's name. I'm trying to manifest for all of you out there who I'm sure would love to see A.J. Brown finally in a Patriots uniform.
I think you need to let that
Let
go.
me ask you
I am not going to until I hear confirmed
Deion
that he's
Sanders
staying.
meme.
I'm not letting
Where we are at right now, Higgins, Metcalf, Brown. Who's the most realistic of the three to shake loose?
I would still say T. Higgins, probably.
Burrow seems like if he leaves, it's going to be a problem, and I don't know if the Bengals are willing to risk pissing off Joe Burrow.
That's
but
where
they
I
haven't
come.
had a Joe Burrow in so long.
I know, but but out of those three, I really don't see A.J. Brown leaving. Like, they just won the Super Bowl. Hear all of his comments afterwards. Like, he seems set in Philly. You were saying the Seahawks general manager was laughing up there about DK Metcalf. Like, and he's under contract. Like, that's the thing. T. Higgins isn't under contract technically right now. Like,
but he is. Like, he might get tagged.
They could tag him, but I still think just he has the clearest path to becoming available.
I will say my argument for A.J. Brown, and like usually this is the kind of far-fetched thing that's too good to be true, where I usually wouldn't really bring it up.
I'm burning that on DK Metcalf, and you're trying to take it to another level.
I'm not. I'm not sold on DK, but with the A.J. Brown thing, the Vrabel connection. He's always wanted to be a Patriot, and Vrabel has kind of hinted that if they had a star player, that's who the offense would run through. Like Drake May's obviously one of those, but like, are you going to feed Rondre Stevenson or are you going to feed A.J. Brown? I think you probably want to feed A.J. Brown, and it sounds like he wants to be that focal point. Like, he didn't seem like he was very happy when the Eagles shifted to being more of a running team. Saquon's still there. He's probably got, like, several more productive years left. That offensive line is still intact and probably going to be for a while. They may be a primary running team, more so than we've even seen in the past. If A.J. Brown's like, I want to be the focal point of an offense with a coach I know, with a team that I grew up loving, I just think that it's a possibility at least. And if it's a possibility, I will continue to try to speak it into existence because of what kind of player he is.
Well, look, we didn't know Tyreek Hill was getting dealt. We had no inkling until about 10 days before. Anything else from today?
I'll say with the other GMs, like maybe the one who looks like some guys could shake free was Howie Roseman in Philly, and that's Milton Williams, Zach Bond, Josh Sweat.
They have some decisions.
It's not going to be as easy as some of those other teams to bring those guys back.
Were you in on that, or did you see any quotes or anything?
I listened to a little bit of it, and I saw some stuff online. He said we have a lot of guys in our prime who are available. We're going to have to try to keep this window open as long as possible, but we're going to have to make some decisions. We're going to have to do things that outside of the box that other teams might not think of doing. So, those are three guys up the spine, right, in that front seven who could be available here.
One for me was Andrew Barrett. I actually got to ask the Browns GM a question about his time with Mike Vrabel and what his value was, and he gushed about Mike Vrabel. He is a very big fan. One, mentioned his humility. He said he was like another quality control coach, which is pretty cool to see from someone who's been a head coach and not exactly a quiet head coach. Like, he's a guy who very much is his own person. So to see he had the awareness to kind of take a step back and really be more of that guy. And we had an idea, but cool to actually hear from Andrew Barry. Also, just in terms of gushing about the guy, I mentioned how he's had success as a player in college and in the NFL. The fact that he can coach every position, which I really don't think we can emphasize that enough, because I think Gerard wanted to be that kind of guy, and we saw in training camp. Like, there were times he tried to be, but there's no substitute for a coach who really can go to like a wide receiver and be like, yeah, this could be a little bit better, like offensive linemen and that kind of thing. With Layden and Cowden and these young receivers, like, you want a head coach who can go over and be like, I can actually help you. So I think that's a really huge part of his entire profile. And just please go on our Twitter, or I don't know if it's on YouTube or not, but Andrew Barry's words on Mike Vrabel just made me feel a lot better, because he's like, they are very, very, very lucky in New England to be getting a head coach like Mike.
And Vrabel said that too. I think it was with Patriots.com. Maybe he's like, I think that's a personal strength of mine, that I can go. I obviously played outside linebacker. I love working with those guys, but I can go position to position and help and give guys information when they need it.
He talked today about how valuable it was for him working with the offensive line last year in Cleveland. I guess we should close on this. I keep thinking of things because, again, my brain's on the last straw here. He was asked about arm length, and he basically, what was the exact quote you tweeted out?
Basically, like, it's only good if you use it.
Right.
So, like, if you have 36-inch arms and you're catching guys, it doesn't really matter if you have long arms. But if you're doing the one-hand stab, then, yeah, they'll work. But if you have 33-inch arms and you stab, it's like, yeah, it might not be a great move.
Basically, what it sounded like is a tackle with 33-inch arms and excellent technique trumps a tackle with 34.5-inch arms and no technique.
Use them.
Right,
Yeah, exactly.
Can't use them. So,
Exactly.
which makes, I mean, you could say that for anything. Look at receiver. If you're fast, that's great. If you can't do anything else off of it, right? If you're a quarterback, you have a cannon, but you can't hit the broadside of a barn, like that's any position. So
Exactly. And that's like the example, like Vidarian Lowe. We always talk about Vidarian Lowe's arm length. Now, we got better. Vrabel specifically mentioned independent hand use because if you have long arms, one arm is longer than two is how defensive line coaches like to say it. So with Vidarian, that first year in New England, everything was a two-hand punch. So it didn't matter that he had like 35.5-inch arms because people were swatting them before he even got close. Once he got to the independent hands, then he started to have more success. So when you talk about a guy like Will Campbell, no, he may not have the longest arms. So when you want to make the argument, oh, he can't stick at offensive tackle, it's because he has excellent patience. He has great recovery ability. He's a good athlete. He has quick feet. It's like all of the traits are there, even if he doesn't have the longest arms to compensate to some level, even if the ceiling for me is a little bit shaky. So that was another great pull.
has anybody seen Will Campbell around? Felger and Maz want me to sneak up on him with a tape measure and just get the answer
I've
already.
been looking for him. I'm tired of this. Like,
I got to
Will,
see him in person. We were saying that earlier.
Will, come on the pod, and let's get this over with.
Get it?
Right,
Well,
right here.
Well, you let us do the measurement, and we're fans. Two of us are fans. We'll help you out. I'm not speaking out of turn there, am I?
I like Will Campbell.
I know.
I'm a Will Campbell fan. Absolutely.
We could add a quarter of an inch for him.
What are
It
you
all
guys
matters.
looking for tomorrow specifically from Elliott Wolf? It's going to be interesting because this is a guy that has been demoted, essentially, right? Maybe doesn't have the same power he did last year, but he's still going to be up there representing the front office.
That's
No,
one. Like, do you have final say? Is he
Yeah.
just going to say no? Like, that's Mike, and we'll see there. But yeah.
I'm going to be interested to see if he's honest about some of their maybe philosophical differences. Obviously, I think they overlap on a lot of things. And when Vrabel's talked about him, he mentions Elliott, and it's not like it feels – sometimes you can feel like when someone's getting shoehorned in and it's like, oh, you didn't really want to mention them. He seems to mention Elliott almost like subconsciously, so I really think he respects his opinion. But also Vrabel mentioned, like, I don't want a bunch of yes men around me, and I think Elliott appreciates that as well. So I know I'm going to be asking, how do you guys, get along and you're arguing on the same page, but also where do you maybe differ on some things and where is Vrabel's perspective, maybe bringing in a different perspective overall. So that'll be really interesting to hear.
So the last time we heard from Elliott Wolf was
Training camp.
yeah, it's
Oh,
been a
wow.
while, and obviously, like at that point, they were still pumping up the offensive line and the receivers and all that. We know how the season played out. I'm interested to see, and this isn't necessarily a specific question. It's just within the answers, and maybe you have to read between the lines of some of the answers. Just growth, just change in approach. What did he learn? And now it's a new front office, so maybe this is less relevant, but what did he take from last year? What did he learn from last year? How did that change his approach? How did that change his priorities? You would hope it changed him at least somewhat, as any season should, good or bad. Like, you should learn every year and get better at what you do. I'm interested to see, are there things he says that maybe he wouldn't have said last year? Do we hear about, different philosophies or different priorities or things like that? Again, probably won't be outright, but that's kind of what I'm going to be looking for within all the answers.
And then one more thing, Ryan Cowden and their relationship. How exactly is their dynamic work? How does Cowden make his job easier? Because, Elliott's the executive vice president and Cowden's a vice president. So they have similar roles, but obviously Elliott is the one at the end of that particular branch of the front office. So, I want to know exactly like what he sees Cowden's role as. And because Vrabel's mentioned it, and it sounds like they're all in lockstep. So hear Elliott's perspective.
All right. There we go. I think we made it 30 minutes, right?
I think we did.
Yeah, we did.
Where we at, Amit?
Well, I have 26.
28.
Well, I almost just gave out the Sports Hub phone number.
Should we go through some combine drills real quick?
617-779-0985.
Call in.
So if we're probably at about that point. So tomorrow, just set it up. Elliott Wolf will talk at 1 o'clock, and we will have reaction. All of us will have reaction to that. Pulpit.com, CLNS Media, 98.5thesportshub.com. We're also going to get to talk to prospects tomorrow, too. We'll close it there so we can get to 30, so I can say I did my job. Defensive linemen, linebackers, and kickers tomorrow. Brian, I'm keeping Ben Sauls for myself. Anybody else from those position groups you're looking forward to hearing from?
I mean, the big guys, Abdul Carter, Mason Graham, right? You'd imagine they've met with the Patriots. How was it, getting to talk to Mike Vrabel? So, yeah, the guys at the top of the draft. I mean, there's just so many defensive linemen. It's so stacked. All of them will be
There's be a lot of talent in here tomorrow.
Yeah, it's going to be quite the group tomorrow.
We're not going to hear anything about it, but I think Mike Green's behind-the-scenes stuff is going to be pretty huge. Mike Vrabel said the most important parts of this for him was the interview process. And Mike Green, I think I personally, I don't think he's better, by consensus or anything. I like him better than Abdul Carter personally, and I would take him over, maybe not over. That'd be a tough decision. Let me hold off on that one.
Put him in the same tier.
Right, but if the off-field stuff is bad enough, and I think it's come out that it was, it something pretty serious. You can look it up if you want. Something that the Krafts would not tolerate if it really was a real thing. So I'm kind of curious how that news continues to trickle out.
You know what? Sometimes if it's like, how do I phrase this? If it's something that guys are okay putting out there, they will talk about it.
Right.
To kind of put it
I don't think
at bay.
he has. I think I saw it in a report.
Right. So it'll be interesting if he says anything about it. Maybe that tells you, okay, he's willing to talk about it. Maybe it's not that bad. But yeah, I'm sure that's, every team that's meeting with him is going over that. So we'll have all that to watch tomorrow and more. When is our next show? Are we doing this daily? Or
We're doing it tomorrow.
Yeah.
We're doing it tomorrow. All right. We'll be back tomorrow.
Wolf
LA
version.
Wolf reaction and more. Till then, for Brian Hines and Taylor Kyles, I'm Alex Barth. Thanks for tuning in.